were your impressions of him as a man or as a president, as a leader?
Well, my impressions, I think, were colored a great deal by my first meeting with him. On this occasion, of course, was not a meeting, it was a handshake. But in July of that year, that first year of 1947, a group of 4 freshman Republican congressmen met with Truman in the Oval Office. The way it came about is that Charlie Kirsten from Wisconsin requested an appointment, and it was given. Incidentally, at the time, since we were members of Congress, we all thought we were important enough to deserve to be invited down to see the president. But as I look back at it in retrospect, I really marvel that Truman ever did it. But then I think that tells us something about him. He was a very good politician. He knew that the Republicans had an overwhelming majority in the House and in the Senate. He needed Republican votes. He also knew something else, that the 4 of us, and I'm sure that our records were checked before we ever got in that Oval Office, had supported the Greek-Turkish aid program, whereas many liberal Democrats had opposed it. He needed us as friends. And then I think he might have been impressed by the fact, he just liked the fact that we had the temerity to ask, and so he sort of appreciated that, because that's the kind of thing he might have done.
What were your feelings as you stepped over the threshold of the Oval Office for the first time?
Well, my feelings were, of course, one of profound respect for that place. It's a hallowed place. I'd read about it and seen pictures of it. But I think my recollection of the meeting is more of the man than of the office. President Truman, before we went there, was one who had not received a particularly good press. When he succeeded Franklin D. Roosevelt, there were many in the media, and many in the country for that matter, who said, can this little pipsqueak from Missouri, poorly educated and so forth, step into the shoes of Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was a great heroic figure for so many years? And many wondered whether he could. I would say that nobody could have filled the shoes of Franklin Roosevelt, but Harry Truman made his own footprints in the sands of history. At this particular point, however, having read about him as being somewhat uneducated, rather crude, and rather limited, I was impressed by the fact that he had a sense of history. He demonstrated that by taking us over to the globe, which was there in the office, and turning it to Manchuria, and pointing out, which was quite prophetic at that time, how important Manchuria in terms of its natural resources could be in the future, and how important that whole area of China could be in the future for this country and for the world, for that matter. And then he turned the globe a little further to the Soviet Union. He said, you know, I like the Russian people. They got along very well, the Russian soldiers did, with our soldiers at the Elbe. He said, as far as I'm concerned, they can have any kind of a system they want, provided they don't try to impose it on us. He spoke not in a dramatic way, but almost in a matter-of-fact way, that the most difficult decision he'd ever made was to drop the atomic bomb, a decision which I think, incidentally, was his greatest decision, the most courageous one, and was totally right. I would say, too, that in terms of his manner, at that point, before he was elected in his own right in 1948, he was somewhat humble, very direct, but not at all overbearing, not at all cocky, as he sometimes later came to be. So all in all, I would say that he made a good personal impression on all of us. I thought right then that those that criticized him because of his lack of education failed to recognize a truth which I have always felt was the case where many leaders are concerned. Education sometimes can strengthen the brain and weaken the backbone. Harry Truman had a pretty good brain, but I can say that his backbone was strong, and that's what sustained him through those years.